Cologne, Germany, February 2002. While most of the city slept, over 300 police officers prepared for the largest coordinated raid in German criminal history. Their target? A man who controlled every dark corner of the city's underworld. A man who turned women into commodities and rivals into corpses. A man so dangerous that even from behind bars, he would order the execution of the prosecutor who dared to bring him down. His name was Necati Arabaci, and this is a story of how he built an empire on exploitation, violence, and fear, and how one phone call would destroy everything. February 14th, 1972. Kaskin Necati Arabaci was born in Turkey, but his destiny wouldn't be written in the streets of Istanbul. It would be carved into the blood-soaked pavement of Germany's red light districts. His family immigrated to Germany when he was young, seeking the promise of a better life. What they found instead was marginalization, poverty, and a system that pushed immigrant communities to the edges of society. For young Necati, the message was clear. The system wasn't built for people like him, so he would build his own system, one where he made the rules. By his early 20s, Arabaci had already developed a reputation in Cologne's underground. He started in the bouncer scene, working the doors of nightclubs in the Kölner Ring, the city's entertainment district. On the surface, it looked legitimate, security work, keeping the peace. But Necati saw something others didn't. He saw opportunity, he saw power, and he saw women, lots of them, young girls, vulnerable, often foreign, looking for work in Germany's legal prostitution industry. They needed protection, they needed guidance. At least, that's what Necati told them. What they didn't know was that their protector would become their worst nightmare. Here's where the darkness really begins. Arabaci and his crew of bouncers didn't just befriend these women. They systematically groomed them, gained their trust, made them dependent. Then came the exploitation. According to police transcripts from his later trial, Arabaci's gang would befriend girls in nightclubs, offer them jobs, promise them safety. Then, once they were isolated and vulnerable, they were forced into prostitution. This wasn't just criminal. This was industrial-scale human trafficking, hidden in plain sight in one of Europe's wealthiest nations. If you think that's dark, subscribe. This empire gets way worse. By the late 1990s, Arabaci wasn't just running girls. He was running territory. He controlled the bouncer scene across Cologne's most profitable entertainment zones. Every nightclub, every bar, every venue in the Kölner Ring paid tribute to him. Refused? Your club got smashed. Your staff got hospitalized. Your business burned. Arabaci's reputation for violence was surgical and terrifying. He didn't make idle threats. When Necati Arabaci promised consequences, bodies followed. Former associates later testified that he personally participated in brutal beatings, leaving rivals permanently disfigured. This wasn't street crime anymore. This was organized terror. But Arabaci's ambition stretched far beyond Cologne. He expanded into the Rhine-Ruhr region, one of Germany's most densely populated industrial areas. And he didn't just control prostitution anymore. He owned it. According to German police estimates, by the year 2000, Arabaci's organization controlled at least 16 brothels across Western Germany. 16. Each one pumping cash into his empire. Each one staffed with women who had no choice, no escape, no hope. The scale was staggering. We're talking millions of euros annually, all funneled through a network of shell companies, corrupt officials, and terrified accomplices. And here's what made Arabaci truly dangerous. He didn't operate in the shadows like most criminals. He operated in plain sight. He drove luxury cars, wore expensive clothes, frequented exclusive restaurants. He acted untouchable because, for years, he was... German authorities knew his name. They knew what he was doing. But proving it? That was another matter entirely. Arabaci insulated himself with layers of loyal enforcers, legal fronts, and a code of silence enforced through extreme violence. Anyone who talked didn't talk for long. Then came the turning point that would define the next chapter of Arabaci's reign. He made a decision that would elevate him from criminal boss to underworld legend. He joined the Hells Angels motorcycle club, not as a regular member, as a high-ranking figure. This alliance gave him something money couldn't buy: international connections, military-grade organization, and a reputation that preceded him into every room. The Hells Angels weren't just a biker club. They were a multinational criminal enterprise with chapters across Europe. And Necati Arabaci had just become one of their most valuable assets in Germany. With the Hells Angels backing, Arabaci's empire reached its peak. His organization didn't just control prostitution. They controlled drug trafficking routes, weapons smuggling, extortion rackets, and money laundering operations that stretched across multiple countries. Former investigators later described Arabaci's network as one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises they'd ever encountered. This wasn't street-level crime. This was corporate-level organized crime, with spreadsheets, logistics, and quarterly projections. But empires built on violence have a fatal flaw. They attract attention. And by 2001, Arabaci's empire had attracted the attention of someone far more dangerous than rival gangs: the German Federal Police. For over 2 years, a specialized task force had been quietly building a case against Arabaci. They'd been monitoring his movements, tracking his associates, documenting every transaction, every phone call, every meeting. They were building something Arabaci never saw coming. An airtight case that would bring down his entire organization in a single coordinated strike. Before I reveal his darkest secret, comment: was he a criminal genius or just lucky? Here's what Arabaci didn't know. While he was living large, convinced of his own invincibility, federal investigators had turned several members of his organization into informants. People he trusted, people who sat at his table, took his money, and then wore wires to his meetings. According to court documents from his trial, police had accumulated over 10,000 hours of surveillance recordings. 10,000 hours. Phone calls, meetings, transactions, threats. Everything. Arabaci had been speaking freely, believing his network was impenetrable. He was wrong. The evidence was devastating. Prosecutors had recordings of Arabaci directly ordering violence against rivals. They had financial records proving systematic money laundering through dozens of front businesses. They had testimony from victims who'd been trafficked, exploited, and threatened by his organization. And they had something even more damning: evidence of corruption. Arabaci hadn't just evaded law enforcement. He'd bought pieces of it. Low-level officials, club owners, even some police officers had been on his payroll, providing intelligence, warning him about raids, looking the other way when convenient. But here's the midpoint twist that changes everything. While police were investigating Arabaci, he was investigating them. Specifically, he was investigating the lead prosecutor building the case against him. According to later testimony, Arabaci had obtained personal information about the prosecutor's family, his home address, his daily routines, and he'd made a decision that would seal his fate. He would eliminate the threat permanently. From inside the criminal underworld, Arabaci reached out to an Albanian contract killer from Duisburg. The hit was ordered. The price was negotiated. The prosecutor was marked for death. What Arabaci didn't know: the visiting room where he ordered the hit was bugged. Police had been recording every conversation, including his discussions about assassinating a federal prosecutor. When investigators heard the recordings, the entire operation shifted into high gear. This wasn't just about prostitution and racketeering anymore. This was attempted murder of a government official. The charges were about to get significantly worse. And the prosecutor, now aware that his life was in danger, was placed under 24-hour police protection. The contract killer was arrested before he could act, but the damage was done. Arabaci had just escalated his case from serious to catastrophic. Even knowing police were closing in, Arabaci couldn't help himself. His violence intensified. In late 2001 and early 2002, multiple witnesses reported brutal attacks linked to his organization. Rival gang members were hospitalized with life-threatening injuries. Business owners who refused protection payments had their establishments firebombed. Women who tried to escape his prostitution network were tracked down and beaten as warnings to others. Arabaci's empire was built on fear, and fear required constant reinforcement. Every act of violence sent a message: no one crosses Necati Arabaci and walks away. But Arabaci made a critical miscalculation. He assumed that going legitimate, at least on paper, would provide protection. He invested money into legal businesses, bought property under shell companies, hired expensive lawyers to create layers of legal insulation. On paper, he was a businessman. In reality, these legitimate ventures were nothing more than elaborate fronts for money laundering. According to financial investigators, millions of euros in criminal proceeds were being cleaned through restaurants, car dealerships, and real estate holdings. It was sophisticated. It was ambitious. But it wasn't enough. By early 2002, investigators had everything they needed: witness testimony, surveillance recordings, financial records, evidence of human trafficking, extortion, assault, weapons violations, and racketeering. The case was ironclad. Now they just needed to move fast before Arabaci caught wind and fled Germany. The operation was codenamed Operation Saber. Over 300 police officers would participate. Dozens of locations would be hit simultaneously: brothels, nightclubs, private residences, business fronts. This would be the largest coordinated raid against organized crime in German history. And it was all focused on one man. What happens next shocked even the prosecutors. Keep watching. February 2002, 0:30. While Cologne slept, police moved into position. Tactical units surrounded brothels. Plainclothes officers monitored escape routes. Helicopters idled at nearby airports in case Arabaci tried to run. Then, at exactly 5:47 a.m., the raids began. Doors were smashed open simultaneously across multiple cities. Officers poured into buildings, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Arabaci's organization never had a chance to react. Within hours, over 40 people connected to his criminal empire were in custody. Bank accounts were frozen. Assets were seized. Documents were confiscated by the truckload. And Necati Arabaci? He was pulled from his residence in handcuffs, surrounded by tactical officers. Cameras flashing as he was escorted to a waiting police van. The man who'd ruled Cologne's underworld with absolute authority was now just another prisoner. But here's what made this raid unprecedented. Police didn't just arrest people. They dismantled the entire infrastructure. Every brothel, every front company, every financial connection was systematically documented and shut down. This wasn't just an arrest. This was decapitation of an entire criminal organization. The evidence seized during the raids filled warehouses. Financial records, weapons, drugs, documents detailing trafficking operations, communications equipment. Prosecutors spent months organizing it all into a case that was, by all accounts, overwhelming. When Arabaci's trial began in 2004, the courtroom was packed. Media, victims, police, prosecutors, defense attorneys. Everyone wanted to see how this would play out. The charges read like a catalog of human misery: pimping, human trafficking, assault, extortion, weapons violations, racketeering. Decades of potential prison time hung in the balance. Then something unexpected happened. Arabaci confessed. Not to everything, but to enough. His lawyers likely advised that fighting the evidence was futile. Prosecutors had recordings, financial proof, witness testimony. Fighting it would only result in a longer sentence. So Arabaci admitted to his role in running prostitution operations, to violence, to racketeering. It was a calculated move designed to minimize damage. And to some extent, it worked. In 2004, Necati Arabaci was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. 9 years for an empire built on human suffering. To many victims and investigators, it felt insultingly short. But here's where the story takes another dark turn. Even from prison, Arabaci continued to run his empire. Investigators later discovered that he was still controlling the Coliseum brothel in Augsburg, one of his most profitable operations, from behind bars. He used coded messages during visits, smuggled communications, trusted lieutenants on the outside. The man was in a maximum security facility, and he was still directing criminal operations. It revealed something terrifying about Arabaci's organization. It was designed to function without him. He'd built a system, not a cult of personality. And that system kept running. Then came perhaps the most shocking revelation from his time in prison. Remember that prosecutor he'd tried to have killed? Police continued monitoring Arabaci's communications even in prison. And those recordings revealed that the contract on the prosecutor's life was still active. Arabaci was still discussing plans to eliminate him once released. When prosecutors heard this, they moved to charge him again, this time seeking Sicherungsverwahrung, indefinite imprisonment for extremely dangerous criminals. If successful, Arabaci would never see freedom again. The new trial hinged on transcript translations from Turkish to German. Arabaci's defense team challenged every word, every interpretation, and then they found it, a mistranslation. One of the key phrases used to prove the ongoing murder plot had been incorrectly translated. The meaning changed. The context shifted. It was enough. The judge ruled the evidence unreliable. Arabaci was acquitted of the new charges. He would serve his original 9-year sentence, nothing more. After serving just over 5 years, Necati Arabaci walked out of German prison. But he wasn't free. Germany didn't want him. He was immediately deported to Turkey, banned from ever returning to German soil. For most criminals, deportation is the end of the story. For Arabaci, it was just another chapter. According to Turkish and European intelligence sources, Arabaci didn't retire. He reconnected with the Hells Angels, this time in Turkey. By 2010, he'd been appointed president of the Hells Angels MC Nomads Turkey. His reputation, his connections, his expertise in organized crime made him valuable. Some investigators believed he was positioning himself as a major player in international criminal networks operating out of Turkey. And that prosecutor? The one who built the case against Arabaci, who'd survived an assassination plot, who'd spent years under police protection. When Arabaci was deported in 2007, the prosecutor fled Germany. According to reports, he relocated to an undisclosed country, changed his identity, and never returned. Think about that. A German federal prosecutor, protected by one of Europe's most advanced law enforcement systems, was so terrified of Necati Arabaci that he abandoned his career, his home, his life. That's the level of fear Arabaci inspired. Even defeated, even deported, his shadow was long enough to drive people into hiding. But Arabaci's story wasn't over. In 2013, when Frank Hainbeth, a major European Hells Angels leader, was arrested in Spain, Arabaci's name surfaced again. Intelligence sources indicated he was being considered as a potential new leader for European Hells Angels operations. His experience, his ruthlessness, his proven ability to build and maintain criminal networks made him a candidate. Whether he accepted or was officially appointed remains unclear. What's certain is that Arabaci remained connected to international organized crime at the highest levels. Then came 2015. Spanish authorities issued a European arrest warrant for Necati Arabaci. The charges: membership in a criminal organization, extortion, drug trafficking, and involvement in brothels in Spain. Apparently, even from Turkey, Arabaci had expanded operations into Spanish territory. The warrant was valid across the entire European Union. But there was one problem. Turkey doesn't extradite Turkish citizens. Arabaci was safe, untouchable, as long as he stayed outside EU borders. And that's exactly what he did. So where is Necati Arabaci today? According to the most recent intelligence reports, he lives in Dubai. The city has become a haven for international criminals seeking luxury and anonymity, and Arabaci fits perfectly. No extradition treaty complications. Plenty of opportunities for money laundering through Dubai's booming real estate market, and a lifestyle of obscene wealth. He's in his 50s now, but by all accounts, he's still connected to criminal networks operating across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. The empire he built in Cologne's red light districts may be gone, but his influence persists. Let's talk about what that empire cost. We know about the criminal charges, the arrests, the convictions. But behind every statistic is a human being whose life was destroyed. Women who were trafficked into Germany with promises of legitimate work, only to be trapped in prostitution with no escape. Families who lost daughters, sisters, mothers to Arabaci's network. Rivals who were beaten, crippled, or killed for the crime of competing with him. Business owners extorted into bankruptcy. Police officers and officials corrupted and compromised. The human toll of Arabaci's empire is incalculable. German authorities estimate hundreds of women were directly exploited through his prostitution operations. Hundreds. each one with a story of manipulation, violence, and trauma. Some escaped and rebuilt their lives. Others disappeared into the shadows of the sex trade, never to be heard from again. Many were foreign nationals, trafficked from Eastern Europe, who couldn't speak German and had no access to help. They were invisible victims of a system designed to keep them that way. And here's what makes Arabaci's story particularly disturbing. He operated during a time when prostitution was legal in Germany. The country's laws were designed to protect sex workers, to bring the industry into the light, to prevent exactly the kind of exploitation Arabaci specialized in. But laws only work when they're enforced. And Arabaci exploited every gap, every loophole, every weakness in the system. He proved that legalization without robust oversight and victim protection doesn't eliminate exploitation. It just changes the address. There are questions that remain unanswered. How many officials were actually on Arabaci's payroll? The corruption charges at his trial were relatively minor, but investigators strongly suspected deeper connections. Were there higher-ranking officials who escaped prosecution? How extensive was his international network? The Spanish arrest warrant suggests operations beyond Germany and Turkey. What other countries? What other crimes? And most haunting, how many victims were there really? Official numbers count only those who came forward, who testified, who were documented. How many others suffered in silence? Arabaci's legacy is a dark chapter in Germany's history with organized crime. He proved that even in a wealthy, stable, democratic nation with strong law enforcement, a sufficiently ruthless individual can build a criminal empire. He showed that violence, intimidation, and systematic exploitation can thrive in plain sight. And he demonstrated that even when such empires fall, their architects can escape real justice, relocating to safe havens where they continue to profit from human suffering. Today, the Kölner Ring Entertainment District is still there. The nightclubs still operate. The bar is still filled with patrons every weekend. But the bouncer scene is different now. Police presence is heavier. Oversight is stricter. Arabaci's arrest and deportation didn't eliminate organized crime from Cologne, but it broke the stranglehold one man held over the city's underworld. Investigators still monitor connections to his old network, now operating under new leadership, new faces, same crimes. And the women? Some advocacy organizations in Germany now work specifically with trafficking victims, providing legal assistance, shelter, and paths out exploitation. These organizations were strengthened partly in response to cases like Arabaci's, which expose how easily vulnerable people could be trapped in criminal networks. It's cold comfort to his victims, but perhaps the attention his case brought helped create systems to protect others. So what's your verdict? Was Necati Arabaci a criminal mastermind who built an empire through intelligence and strategy? Or was he just a coward hiding behind violence, exploiting the vulnerable because he knew they couldn't fight back? Did his 9-year sentence represent justice, or was it an insult to everyone he destroyed? And here's the bigger question. With Arabaci living freely in Dubai, connected to international criminal networks, protected by countries that won't extradite him, has justice been served at all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Should Germany have done more to keep him imprisoned? Should international pressure force countries like Turkey and the UAE to cooperate on extradition? What would real justice look like for someone like Necati Arabaci? Next week, we're covering an even more insane story. The mobster who embezzled $200 million disappeared into thin air and was never seen again. Investigators are still searching. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Necati Arabaci's story is a reminder that evil doesn't always look like monsters. Sometimes it looks like a businessman in an expensive suit driving a luxury car, eating at exclusive restaurants. Sometimes it wears a smile while destroying lives. And sometimes it escapes justice entirely, living in luxury while its victims struggle to rebuild from the ashes. Remember the women. Remember the families. Remember that behind every true crime story are real people who suffered real consequences. Their stories matter more than his.